I am live. I am reading The Laird and the Lady. It is a novel by Joan Marshall Grant. She used to write, or she wrote 7 books of her previous incarnations. She's passed away in 1989. And this is a novel she wrote, and it was published in 1949. It is a romance. A laird meets the lady being Marylda, who is an heiress of millions, but nobody knows it yet. She's married now to Rowan, and they are in the Highland at his castle Cloud. We are Fire Against Mist is chapter 12. Marylda, though not usually superstitious, decided that the unlucky 13th was not unfounded. For the next morning, when Janet was due to leave in an hour, her mother rang up to say that one of the housemaids had developed mumps. "Of course you must stay on. It would be pointless to risk it," said Rowan, and Janet made half-hearted protests, forcing Marylda to press the invitation. During the next few days she produced a more subtle attack, leaving Rowan alone with his wife so pointedly, being so obviously tactful, that he worried because she felt an unwanted third and blamed Marylda for not being nicer to her. Rowan regretted that Duncan had guests of his own, for it would have been easier with a foursome, though that would have left someone out after dinner when Georgina expected a rubber of bridge. Marylda could not decide whether Rowan was remarkably obtuse or deliberately shutting his eyes to a situation he found embarrassing. But surely he realized what Janet was trying to do. This morning she had excelled herself, arranging for Marylda to be left behind, while she went with Rowan and Georgina to shoot at Darwin. It had rained heavily during breakfast, a meal Marylda now attended to maintain her status as the dispenser of tea and coffee in her own house. The telephone rang and Janet said, "I expect that's Alistair cancelling the drive. It's far too wet to shoot." When it proved to be only the butcher, inquiring whether Mrs. MacTaggart had ordered 2 haggises or 3, she was clever enough to make Rowan anxious that Marylda would catch a chill if she stood all day in the box. So it was he who suggested she should stay at home. Janet's quick kiss on the cheek as she went out to join Georgina and Rowan in the car was a triumph, worthy of the "Darling, how I shall envy you cozy by the fire when I'm frozen, but I can't appoint Alistair when he's short of guns." "Enjoy yourself," Marylda answered sweetly, thinking, what we'd both like is a Tommy gun at short range, and it was so guileless that at first I pitied her. At least they haven't got a monopoly on walking in the rain. She rang the bell and told Agnes she would be out to lunch and wanted sandwiches. Before she had gone more than 100 yards, she began to regret her decision, but she could not turn back now without loss of face. Anyway, Angela would enjoy the walk. Where should they go? Up towards Ben Dewey, where there was a dry cave which would make this lonely picnic less intolerable. She trudged through the heather, her hands thrust into the pockets of an old mackintosh she had taken from the collection in the gun room. Somewhere behind her, a nailed boot rang sharply against the stone. She caught hold of Angela and pulled her into the shelter of a granite outcrop. "It's only one of the keepers," she whispered. "We let him go past." The dog's coat was reassuring to her cold hand. It smelt of wet, harassed tweed, like Rowan when he came back to her out of the rain. "Marylda!" The shout echoed among the rocks. She recognized Duncan's voice. "Here!" she shouted back. He loomed out of the mist. "Agnes said you'd gone towards Ben Dewey, so I thought I might catch up with you." "I'm so glad to see you, and so is Angela. She thought you were a leopard that was stalking us." He fondled Angela's ears. "She won't admit that she mistook me for a rabbit that might make rude faces. Rowan's gone over to Darwin with Janet and Georgina." "I know. That's why I thought there was a chance of finding you alone. If sandwiches will do, will you stay to lunch? We have a wide choice of dining rooms, a redundance of heather and the cave, if you will come so far." I can offer alternative accommodation, an abandoned croft which has still a roof and a fireplace. The craft clung to a steep field of turf in the shelter of rowan trees. The door had fallen from its hinges and was held in place by a twist of rope. There was a stack of wood and dry gorse beside the hearth. It's sometimes used for shooting lunches when they drive the high ground, he explained. She watched the quick flame surge up. He was clever to make a fire so easily against the mist. He put on larger wood, and the wide chimney began to hum with warmth. That's better, he said, sitting back on his heels. I can contribute a flask of whiskey and 4 pears. Mother sent a basket of them to you. To me or Georgina? To you, not to Georgina or Janet. Mother is on your side. It was comforting that he did not pretend there was no conflict. I have quantities of sandwiches. Mrs. McTaggart always overrates my appetite, or else thinks Angela less fastidious than she really is. Fastidious. She put the open packet on the floor between them. Angela has an ancestral memory of the time when dogs of her quality were never offered less than shin of beef. Angela is a person of discernment. She will never accept less than her rights. Meaning that I'm a fool to let Janet get away with so much? Yes, if you wish me to be blunt, you let her turn your pride against you. She flatters Rowan, so you refuse to give him the same compliment. Don't you realize that all men need praise? He wants you to admire his shooting, to give him the masculine satisfaction of teaching you to do things that he will always do a little better. But you deliberately play into Janet's hand. You won't go to the butts with him, you get Robbie to teach you to fish. You are far too pleased when you beat him at golf. But I loathe seeing things killed, and surely he saw enough blood in the war. He despises inefficiency, so why should he watch me being blundering amateur with a rod? And if he hadn't been so sure that I couldn't play golf, I wouldn't want to win. It's something more than ordinary female jealousy that's upsetting you. Don't tell me about it if you think it's none of my business, but if you need a friend, well, I'm here. One doesn't starve a friend, so have another sandwich. He took it, then unscrewed the top of his flask and held it out to her. Have a swig of whiskey, you're cold. To Duncan and Marylda, for Rowan against the rest, she said. He heard the break in her voice. To Rowan and the devil take his enemies. So you know I'm afraid of losing Rowan and that I'm losing my nerve. I knew the first, and also that you've got nothing to fear there, and guessed the second. What's the season? Spooks? What's the reason? Spooks? He took a brand from the fire and lit his pipe with deliberation, as though his full attention was on getting a steady draw through the tobacco he had tamped down so carefully with his forefinger. Why spooks? Surely you don't believe in them? Oh, yes, I do, and so, I think, do you, though you're finding it rather an uncomfortable jolt to the materialism you've tried to cultivate. You're scared, and you'd better tell me about it, because otherwise you'll tell Rowan, and I don't think that would be a good idea. But how do you know I'm scared? Because your eyes have a look that wasn't there when we met in Paris, and I happen to have seen the croquet party too. So, when you talked about it, I knew you'd got the sight. And if you saw that, you've probably been aware of several other extras in Cloud. If you go on trying to make yourself believe it's only imagination, you'll start thinking you're going off your head. I know that's uncomfortable, for it happened to me before I learned more sense. Does Rowan have the sight too? Duncan hesitated. He used to have it, and most appalling nightmares when he was younger. Yes, I know, she said. He told me about them once when he was half asleep. I don't think it's healthy for him to be reminded too much, at least not at the moment. He's one of the bravest chaps I've met, but he has always been afraid of ghosts. It was hardly Georgina's fault. Instead of explaining that they were quite ordinary, she pretended he was deliberately telling lies. And when that didn't work, she made him sleep without a light in the room and sent him alone into the worst parts of the castle to try to harden him. So you see, tell me, but don't tell Rowan, at least not yet. So you really believe ghosts are real, not just time getting muddled or something scientific? He laughed. Reality and science are not opposites, and materialism is out of date even among conservative professors. My personal view is that a ghost can be anything from a complete personality, whose physical body happens to be dead, to a fraction of a personality, the rest of whose attention is elsewhere. So you mean that a ghost could be part of someone who is still alive? Why not? But we needn't discuss generalities. I believe that Hector's first wife still lives in Cloud, that Georgina is perfectly aware of the fact, and she was not even surprised when you saw her too. So long as she remains here, there's going to be tension in the house. If you've got the courage to do it, and I'm not underrating that it requires a considerable amount, I think you should try to find out why she came back. I've tried myself, but I can't get enough to work on. One thing I can warn you against, on 2 occasions I've heard the most damn awful sound of a man sobbing in a sealed room. But why a man? Is it Hector? She laughed a little shakily. I think this deserves another snort. She lifted the flask. To de-spooking Cloud, and God bless our conspiracy. God bless you, he said gently. This was chapter 12. Chapter 13 is entitled The River. Happy Wednesday.